Mr. Bakshi Asuman, and today we're discussing nothing but sports disputes and how we can, resolve some of the disputes in sport. We'll also talk about things to do with player image rights. We'll also talk about some of the issues that we have seen in the Uganda sporting scene. For example, there was a case of VAR usage in Uganda. And for those of you who know, we don't really have the training capacity. We'll also just a little bit, I think, discuss a bit of the issues concerning a bit of Pamoja that is coming up. But importantly, we're going to talk about the Uganda Basketball League. The playoffs, the semifinals are in. And City Oilers are already cruising with a 2-0 lead. You have KIU in there in the mix as well against the UCU Cannons. You have KIU against the UCU as well. And then, of course, the Lady Dolphins against the UCU Lady Cannons. So much action. Jetty Lady Jaguars are also in action. And first season into the semifinals. What a way to start your life in the big league. Well, like I said, with me, I have Bakshi and Gava. Gava, hello, good evening.
Hello, Moses. Good evening. How are you doing? Hope you're well.
Yes, I'm good. Hi, Bakshi. How are you doing?
Yes, Moses, I'm good. You finally pulled me into discussing sports on public platforms, but it's okay.
Apart from Yakafunda here, we are
finally in
Yakafunda. We are in Yakafunda now.
Once in a while, we shall be able to pull up.
Yeah, definitely. It's very difficult to get Bakshi to discuss Ugandan sports. He's had
exactly. He likes doing it informally.
whichever platform. It's really difficult to get
very formally. Now Kafunda here he tells you all about Ugandan sports, but to get him online is like no.
Truly. But gentlemen, Gava, there's been a lot of things that have happened, and ultimately one of the things that I think we cannot go without talking about in Ugandan sport is the constant conflicts that keep coming up in Ugandan sports. Now, I'm very sure that you, as someone who has studied conflict resolution, has studied how you can help different parties to come to amicable situations, on how to handle situations. I'm sure that this is something that you can be able to highlight for the different people who will definitely be able to watch. First of all, what is conflict resolution?
Okay, first of all, maybe I could introduce myself a little bit more. My name is Charles Gavamkulia. I am team leader at Resolve 360 and I'm also team leader at CG Engineering Consults. I'm an arbitrator, an adjudicator, and a certified mediator. And of course, what's most important here is that I'm a great sports enthusiast. And some people call me the ambassador of Uganda to Rwanda because of the very many times that I've paid visits to Rwanda. So when we are looking at dispute resolution, it's a very key area, most especially in this area of sports. In this area of sports, which is very, sports is a commercial industry now. It's a big industry now. So it's very, very important for you to look at things like disputes. Of course, when you look at disputes in sports, they come from very many different areas. Earlier in the day, we were looking at it with Bakshi, and we are looking at a sport, for example, football. And we looked at issues like, for example, you could have an ownership dispute whereby maybe one team has been bought by a different owner, and there's a dispute there. You could have disputes between a club and a player, and that cuts across whichever sport, because all sports have clubs and there could be a player issue. You could have a dispute between the club and the federation, and you could have a dispute between third parties and the federation. For example, you could have a dispute between a kit manufacturer for the federation, or you could even have disputes between third parties and clubs. So given the very many players in the sports industry and the very many kind of stakeholders that we have, and given how much commercial interest that sports generates now, I mean, we've seen how much money people are being paid in Saudi Arabia. We always marvel at how much money NBA players are given. We always marvel at how much NFL players are paid. We always marvel at how much maybe professional rugby players are paid, professional cricket players are paid. And it's just a matter of time before we get there. And in case, even before we get there, we already have pending disputes, between clubs and managers, clubs and players, ownership issues, clubs and the federation. So all that comes in what breeds conflict in these situations. Yes, so conflict can come from different areas, and as Murphy's law states, what can go wrong will always go wrong, and that is actually the very basis of dispute. So what can go wrong, what you think can go wrong, will surely always go wrong, and when it goes wrong, you need to have ways of resolving what has gone wrong in a very costly and timely manner.
That's very interesting. There's always something that could go wrong in sport, but also in general in life. There's always something that can go wrong. And Bakshi, maybe this is why I bring you in to also just give us, first of all, introduce yourself fully, like Gava Mukulia has introduced himself. People know him as Gava, but now they know him as Gava Mukulia. Bakshi, please. And then also tell us, just walk us through what you think about conflict resolution, and for someone who has really been in sports administration before and now is in the back end, what are some of the things that you have seen over the years?
I'm not yet at the back end because in my other life, I am a deputy CEO of Proline Football Club. I've been at Proline for the last, I think, about 10, 11 years almost. I think from 2011. So it's more than actually 10 years. But Baksh Asman is my name. I love sports. I watch all sports. The only sport I played is cricket.
And he broke his knee while
And I
playing.
broke my knee while playing.
You ask yourself,
he's a retired cricketer whose career didn't even kick off.
no wonder the man can no longer from a piano.
But I love sports. I watch all and all that.
Today we were watching the ICC cricket World Cup, the opening match between England and New Zealand,
and it was really an interesting one.
Yeah.
But that's really my sports world, and Proline introduced me to sports administration, and I've really interacted with a lot of things. And like Gava has mentioned, conflict in sports can never end, whether you want it or you don't want, because anything that has one or two parties in normal life will have conflict. But the easiest of conflicts that we have seen happening in any sports disciplines is resulting either from players, and usually that's where the biggest conflict is, between the players and the clubs, and then the federations come in. That's what in of a professional context. But we have seen incidences where even you'll see how federations, unions, associations have signed contracts with sponsors, and the clubs don't know what's really happening. Conflict can really result from there. So there are so many things, but also even during just a match day, the incident where I've seen instances of matches being replayed, yellow cards being rescinded, or players actually being fined after, all that causes conflict. But also simple things.
Yeah, my colleagues Bakshi and Gava are having a bit of internet challenge, so you'll bear with us as they keep on reconnecting.
Can you hear us, Moses?
Yeah, now I can hear you, gentlemen. Now I can hear you.
We are in Uganda. That's what you can tell me in Uganda.
We continue thanking the Ugandan internet service providers.
Yeah. So I don't know where you lost me from, but the fact is, like Gava has mentioned, in everything we do in the sports industry, we shall always have conflict. But I just wanted to mention, you asked something very interesting. In most times, we think there's no conflict in administration. but I'll tell you there's a lot of conflict in sports administration.
Wow. At this point, I'm about to ask Bakshi and Gava to climb a tree for internet.
Coaches and clubs like this, but why? Moses, but why?
Your internet is really bad. Bakshi, we kind of lost you at a point where you talked about there's always conflicts with the sports administration, and that's always going to be a constant. I don't know if Gava is exploring the idea of putting the router on the mast.
Just bear with us.
Just bear with us, just a moment. We seem to be trying to change connections.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So,
but right now I think we're clear. Yes.
Yes. Now you're clear. Bakshi, go back to what you were talking about before we were rudely interrupted by Ugandan internet.
No, I was saying one of the things that we usually try to forget is that conflict only happens outside with third parties. But we have seen so many contracts of coaches being terminated. We have seen so many contracts of players being terminated, and we don't know where the conflict is coming from. Sometimes when players actually are signing on to contracts, they even don't know what they are signing on to. Sometimes even when I've had so many instances where you give a player a form and they say, hey, do you remember this form? And say, I've never signed that form. I'm like, but you've been playing for the last 5-7 years. How have you been able to get a license without being able to know this form? So we have even seen instances in federations, in clubs, where managers and coaches end up signing to contracts when even they don't know what KPIs they are signing up to. When you hear about what was happening in the Cricket Association, where there was an indifference between the KPIs of what the coach had and what the association expected. And
yes.
that can easily lead into conflict. So that is it, that in the management levels, there are always conflicts coming in and out.
Yeah, Bakshi, you speak about management conflicts, and now I want to bring you to something that really hits home for you in the basketball world. Recently, the FUBA administration came out and announced that this year's winners will not participate in next year's BAL competition. Now, isn't that a conflict in its own and of such high magnitude? Because we all know that for most of the basketball teams in Uganda, they are no longer aspiring for the 5 million reward that is on table. They are aspiring to actually go and participate in the money bag that is the BAL. That is kind of a conflict of its own, isn't it?
Yes, and the way that was placed, it already arises a huge conflict. Because at the beginning of the season, if communication was done well by the federation, by FUBA, it means that every club that is participating is aware of what they're participating for and what they're aiming for. But what happens is, at one moment we need to understand the circumstances. The realignment of the league was supposed to happen after COVID. But I think because of the different processes and all that was happening, that was unable to be happening. Now, by the time the federation was communicating, clubs were preparing for playoffs. So already that alone causes conflicts. And it means if there is no proper conflict resolution mechanism like the ones Gava will speak about, or ways of able to listen to people, mediate such conversations, there's going to be a whole conflict aspect. Because I'll tell you, there are neighbors as fans who have said we shall not step at any basketball court because we are protesting. That's already a conflict. The game is losing fans, it's losing revenue, but also we are losing popularity among different people who were actually enjoying the game. So there are simple things that might look silly, but because the nameplates set targets, oil has set targets, power set targets, Real Life that targeted also set targets. Their target is not only the 5 million, their target is to play at bar. But for you to play at a bar, you need to be a champion. But the federation is telling you no. And we saw even that when nameplates wrote, it was not clear, is it writing to the federation or there is a specific conflict resolution body at FUBA that it's writing to? We have had instances where players have been fined and you are sure, is it the competition score that is giving the fines? Is it a conflict resolution? Where do I go and all that? So sometimes those processes are not clear and it creates more conflict, but makes the entire understanding of how best do I address the issue not clear.
Yeah, it limits the access to justice, because different parties do not exactly know how best they can access justice given the ambiguity in the dispute resolution mechanisms and processes. So we've been trying to look at that, and I think there is a huge issue across the entire Ugandan sports industry in that regard.
Yes, Gava, now that is now a point where I'm going to bring you on. Of course, Natasha there saying it's hot. I don't know what is very hot, but clearly. But Gava, I bring you in now. The question that I want to ask you, quite interestingly, is what are some of the mechanisms that can be put on the table for us to really manage some of these conflicts that arise from all of these scenarios and circumstances?
Yeah, of course, when you look at dispute as dispute, then there are different ways of resolving dispute. Of course, there is the normal way, which is the litigation, which is going to court, which is which all of us know, because we all like using that term. You will hear from my lawyer. Hey, so Moses, you will hear from my lawyer. So we all like using that term. So that's litigation, where two parties or three parties, multi-party, can go to court in order to seek redress or to resolve a dispute. But then there are also alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, which include mediation, which include negotiation, which include conciliation, which include dispute boards, which include adjudication, which include arbitration, which include early neutral evaluation, and which also include expert determination. So there's quite a wide array of dispute resolution mechanisms that are actually open to us and which we can actually exploit in order to make sure that conflicts are resolved in a very timely manner, in a very cost-effective manner, in a manner that maintains business relationships, in a manner that maintains that sense of privacy, because you bear me witness, not everything has to be put out there. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in all other leagues, but we'll never know about it. There's a lot of stuff that, because remember, I told you sport at the very core right now is a commercial industry. No one joins. Okay, people join sports for other reasons, altruistic reasons, but we could also join sport because you want to make some money. And therefore, you can't just be, just doing the sports just like that. So because of that, it's very, very important for us to maintain that at the core. And there are very many ways of us trying to do that, while also trying to make sure that, business is saved, because it doesn't pay for us to have a dispute going on for so long. If it's a league, then probably the league will have to stop. If it is a club, then probably the club will have to stop. So there are very many, we have to utilize the different area, the different continuum, the different mechanisms that are along the spectrum to make sure that we are able to resolve disputes, most especially in the sports industry.
Yeah, I know that you've seen probably what has been happening at the world of FUFA, and what are some of the things that you have identified that you think this could lead to this kind of circumstance, this could lead to a conflict, and perhaps your suggestions on we could tackle it, this issue this way, we could approach it this way, and ideally, how can we protect, one, the federation? How can we protect, two, the fans? And how, and most importantly, the most important stakeholder in sports, the players?
Yes. So when we look at FUFA, which is the Federation of Uganda Football Associations, you're looking at an entity that has what it calls its statute. And I think the current statute that we are using, the FUFA statute, is that of 2018. Now, what is key in this statute is that FUFA tries to lay out one form of dispute resolution, and that is arbitration. So I'm going to really try to lay into the FUFA statute of 2018. We are going to dissect it, and I am going to, in my opinion, I will be raising areas that I consider red flags and where I think FUFA should try to improve. Because I understand that the practice of arbitration, also in commercial spaces in Uganda, has been on the low, and that FUFA was trying to probably be modern in 2018, around 5 years ago, when they tried to reenact this statute. But I suppose that given the lack of exposure, if I may call it that, there were a number of mistakes and a number of misjudgments that were made in this statute. And therefore, most times when you're trying to look at it, it actually goes against some of the central principles of arbitration, which it actually lays out as the principal mechanism of resolving dispute in the statute. So it's important for me to, when I'm starting, to mention that some of at the center of arbitration is a principle, what we call the principle of party autonomy. And this means, it simply means that the parties are at liberty. They are free to choose, one, their dispute resolution mechanism; two, how they choose to resolve the dispute; three, the number of the people they want to resolve the dispute; four, where they want to resolve the dispute; five, the law that they want to resolve the dispute. And of course, the principle of party autonomy also goes hand in hand with what the lawyers will call privity of contract, which is that, a contract is between two parties, and, a party that is not part of that contract then really finds it hard to enter that. And therefore, those are some of the, the principle of party autonomy is really key when it comes to the practice of arbitration. And I'm going to also show how the FUFA statutes actually go against the principle of party autonomy, and therefore the FUFA statute of 2018, whereas I could argue that it was well placed in heart, in action doesn't actually allow parties to receive that access to justice that they're supposed to receive, or that quick resolution that they're supposed to receive. So the very first part that is very chaotic in the FUFA status, in the FUFA statute, is the definition of arbitration tribunal, and that is, I think, in Article 1, because it defines the arbitration tribunal as a private court of justice acting instead of an ordinary court, and later on goes on to define the ordinary court as a state court, which can hear public and private legal disputes. It is wrong because in the very first instance, arbitration never seeks to be a court. In fact, it is wrong practice for us to use arbitration as private litigation. Therefore, the FUFA statute, from its very first definition, gets it wrong. And in such a way, it looks at as arbitration as a court. And I think it gets that from the nomenclature that is used by one of the key arbitral institutions that the FUFA statutes refer to, which is the Court of Arbitration for Sports. So I think there's a place for us to refine. Arbitration is simply the fact that two or three warring parties, disputing parties, refer a dispute to a third independent neutral party to resolve the dispute. Arbitration is meant to be informal. It's meant to be flexible. So referring to an arbitration tribunal as a court, a private court, goes wrong against the actual definition of arbitration. And therefore, again now, when you look at Article 13, which is the members' obligations, it is in Article 13 that FUFA tries to make it a point that, that different members, remember FUFA is made up of different member associations, made up of 16 teams that are in the first division. That's the general assembly. It's made up of the second division teams. It's made up of different guilds, that women's football, futsal, the referees body, and so many other Article 13, member clause that any dispute involving itself or one of the members shall only be referred to an arbitral tribunal or to the Court of Arbitration for Sports, which is based in Lausanne, Switzerland. And of course, it keeps on to urge the members that any recourse sought before ordinary courts, which are the state courts, is prohibited, provided that this doesn't violate any binding law. And it goes on to state in Article 15 that there will be expulsion of members in case they bring any cases before ordinary courts. At the center of this, it brings my argument to the fact that, one, of course, this is the arbitration clause that FUFA is adopting. It's important to note that the arbitration clause that FUFA is adopting it departs away from the nature of the rest of the model arbitration clauses. So different institutions have model. Okay, the general practice of arbitration is that we have model clauses, because without a model clause, then you will have what someone can call a pathological clause, which is a clause that could probably be inoperable. And it's important for us to juxtapose this statutory clause vis-a-vis a model clause, and we note certain things. One, of course, the clause
we seem to have lost Mr. Gava to
of course
internet. He's back. Yes.
Yeah, we've seen different court cases where we've seen a court case actually in there's jurisprudence, net worth, I think net worth consult versus the Attorney General, where the clause was very ambiguous, and it said that the parties will choose either adjudication or arbitration. So one of the parties went for arbitration, and then one of the parties ran to court. No, one of the parties ran to litigate in court, and then one of the parties ran to court saying that the clause said we should arbitrate, but the judge interpreted it and said that the clause is actually not clear. It says this or that. So it's important that they already state that the methodology should be arbitration. But the clause falls short on mentioning the procedural law, what law will govern, more so in the instance where it is the arbitration tribunal, because the statutory clause says either an arbitration tribunal or the Court of Arbitration for Sports. For the Court of Arbitration for Sports, it's easy. The seat is Lausanne, it's Switzerland. So the procedural law that will govern the arbitration is Switzerland. But then that poses the question that how many of our lawyers, how many of our practitioners, for example, those that would be
Gava, we lost you on the point of how many of our lawyers or how many of our legal practitioners in Uganda understand the Swiss law.
Is the internet back?
Now I can get you. We lost you
at the point. The creators of Ugandan internet are doing us a disservice. So the clause falls short on.
Yes, go on.
Yeah, perhaps one of the listeners should really help us with the internet. So the clause falls short on defining the seat of arbitration. I don't know if it leaves that to the parties. The clause falls short because it has already specified. It's going against the principle of party autonomy by already specifying what the parties should do. It doesn't specify any other dispute resolution mechanisms. It tells the parties immediately they have to go for arbitration. It falls short of talking about procedural rules, falls short on the procedure for appointing of arbitrators. Then it doesn't mention, sometimes you can have a small claim, and going to the Court of Arbitration for arbitration of sports in Switzerland, if your claim is not big, then it doesn't make commercial sense. Remember I said at the bottom of this is actually a commercial activity. So just to refer the case to CAS is 1,000 francs, 1,000 Switzerland francs, not the ones from France. And then now, when the case is heard, when the
Not the
statement of
ones
appeal
from
is
Rwanda.
heard, not the ones from Rwanda. So when the case now has to be heard, then they give you the costs of the award, which can rank from maybe 80 million going upwards. So parties normally are not willing to go into that. So this statute and that statutory clause is problematic in that it doesn't present it doesn't present a way that
Gava, it seems Bakshi has come and taken away the internet. But as we wait for Gava's internet to return, Gava, yeah,
yes.
your internet is back.
Yeah.
It seems
So
Bakshi
then
yes.
given the case that sometimes we will have parties, not able to foot some of these bills. Remember, when you go to CAS, when you can't, if both the parties are both supposed to pay that money that is supposed to be paid to CAS in order for CAS to appoint an arbitrator. So if the parties can't pay, then all the other option that is existing right now is for third party financing. But that is problematic because Article 13(1)(m) of the FUFA statute prohibits any third parties from coming in to interfere with the members' activities. Yes, Moses, are you on?
Yes, I'm on. No worries. Keep going, Gava.
Okay. So third-party funding is not provided for in the FUFA statute, yet it's a new paradigm. It's how things are being done in case the parties don't have money there.
We seem to be facing a very difficult time when
Yes,
it comes
Moses.
to. Yeah, now you're back.
Oh, good. Okay. And then, of course, Article 67 is the one that that greatly talks about arbitration. And it, of course, mentions the fact that disputes can be referred to an independent arbitral tribunal recognized by FUFA or CAF. But FUFA does not provide for how the recognition of that tribunal can be done, or it provides a court.
Wow. We will keep praying for Gava's internet, and it's very interesting that his internet is going off at a point when he's really dissecting very, very critical
Moses?
information. Yes, Gava, I can now hear you. You may need to put your internet router at the
Yes,
window
Moses.
or on the rooftop somewhere.
Yes. So I was saying that whereas we are trying to promote CAS, we should also promote local arbitral institutions. And therefore, it's important and also for ease of parties, such that they're able to access justice and be able to resolve disputes very quickly and in a cost-efficient manner. We should be able to adopt arbitral institutions, such as Resolve 360, for example, to be able to offer some of these services to FUFA, because we are well trained and we know what has to be done, and therefore it's a big wake-up call for FUFA to deal with this. So some of the key things is that, for example, Article 68, which presents quite a problem for me, is an article about jurisdiction where it says that recourse may only be made to a tribunal in accordance with Article 66. Internal channels of FUFA have been exhausted. Now, the internal channels that FUFA presents are the disciplinary committee, the ethics and integrity committee, the appeals committee. But a dispute could be on a technical issue or it could be on a legal issue. And sometimes these internal channels may not be the right way. And in that way, FUFA is trying to infringe with the principle of party autonomy, which is the core of arbitration, because parties are supposed to determine how best they resolve their own issue. So by you trying to limit them and trying to make sure that everything goes through FUFA, that really infringes, one, on the principle of privity of contract, because the contract may not be with you, FUFA. The contract may be between a player and a club, and maybe because they have an issue in interpretation of the contract, so they probably need an arbitrator to decide on that particular issue. So they may not need to go through the disciplinary issue, the disciplinary committee of. In fact, going through such makes the procedure very long, because the disciplinary committee will tell you, we need 2 weeks to hear this. Then you're unhappy, then you go through ethics and integrity. Then you're unhappy, you go to appeals. By the time you go to the arbitrator, who will also now start his process, if it is an issue we are having with a player, then that means the player won't have season. We are trying to resolve an issue on interpretation of one clause on the contract. So it doesn't make sense how FUFA drafted that. And of course, FUFA repeatedly in the statute says that the use of ordinary courts is prohibited. And now, when you lay out arbitration, for example, as your procedure for dispute resolution, arbitration, whereas the current Arbitration Act, for example, the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 2000 of Uganda, in somewhere there in the earlier sections, prohibits judicial intervention. There's supposed to be minimal judicial intervention, but the arbitration process is supported by the courts. For example, to the Court of Arbitration, remember that Moses, you can hear me?
Now I can hear you. Now I can hear you. Gava? Are you there? What?
Saying that, yeah, I'm there.
Okay, now I can get you.
Yeah. So courts can't be ruled away completely, because there are different ways that the courts support the process of arbitration through issues like enforcement. More so now, if you're sending people to CAS where they will get a foreign award, they will need a court, a local court here, to enforce it as a foreign award. And luckily, Uganda is a member. Uganda ratified the New York Convention of 1958 and domesticated it, meaning that we are able to enforce foreign awards as if they were local awards in our local courts. And then the courts, of course, also bring aside a process of setting aside an award. Sometimes arbitrators, because that's a procedure that is laid out here. Sometimes arbitrators, they make an award that is completely wrong, or they make an award where there's proof that there was collusion, there was bribery. So they ignored an important point of law. So therefore, there are different ways that, courts can, there are different mechanisms that are laid in our act, the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, whereby courts can actually set aside awards. So in any case that an award was made by an arbitrator, even if they are, the statute kind of makes it seem like the arbitrator won't, but sometimes the arbitrator will make a mistake. And also sometimes parties can want to challenge and want to set aside the award. So it is wrong for the statute to completely say that the courts have completely no way. And also there's a key issue of arbitrability. There are some times when an issue just can't be arbitrated and it has to just simply go to court. So by the statute locking out courts, And then, because sometimes there are issues where there has to be a precedence, or there needs to be an issue on interpretation of a crucial point of law. So in such cases, the arbitrability becomes a bit of a challenge, or there are some issues where the issue is contravening public policy of Uganda. For example, if it's a bad procurement issue, such issues can't go to arbitration. So by the statute being that narrow and trying to lock out arbitration, then it actually defeats the purpose of arbitration. Yeah, so with that, we can see that normally there's an imbalance in different contracts across the board in different sports. There's improper dispute resolution systems, as we've seen in the FIFA statute. And football is such a big sport, but it's amazing that still that behind under the statute is such an ambiguous way. There's violation of the principle of contract, violation of principles of purity of contract. There's limited involvement of local arbitral institutions. There's, of course, as we've seen, there's difficult sensitization of teams. There is no involvement of other dispute resolution mechanisms, because it's very important to know that arbitration will be expensive.
I think we've lost. Yes, Gava, you're back. Gava is still struggling with his internet, but in one of, as on just below your screen there, we're saying share with us some of the sports conflicts that you have seen in Ugandan sports. But Gava, before we were rudely interrupted by Ugandan internet, you were concluding on something.
Yeah, I was concluding. I was saying I was saying that there's a number of issues in Ugandan sports, and I was just giving a highlight of the FIFA statute, because football is one of the biggest sports, let's face it here. But it just points to how much work has to be done in order for us to first of all, set up proper dispute resolution mechanisms, to increase sensitization on dispute resolution, to prevent ambiguity in the regulations, to talk about how better some of these mechanisms can be used. For example, yes, you mentioned arbitration, but then you mentioned very many things that actually defeat the actual practice of arbitration in the industry. So given the fact that there are very many instances where we'll encounter dispute, it's very important for us to look at some of the issues and work on them. So over to you, Moses. I've gone on and on.
Yes, Moses,
yes,
before you come in, that comment, I just wanted to give an example. When Gava was saying that there are moments we need to set precedent, it's really very important, because when a conflict happens in a sport and there's no precedent set, it means if another conflict happens, there's no history of where we can make the referral to. There are so many sports conflicts that have really happened in Uganda, and precedents have been set are really so negative. They're not really very positive and progressive. I'll just give a few examples, and just to speak to what are some of those conflicts that have really happened. And some are contractual, some are not really. I'll give a very simple example. We have had incidences where coaches have been either dismissed, where coaches have resigned and they never fulfill the obligations of their contracts, or the coach was just dismissed. And the club says, you know what? You performed poorly. And who is dismissing him? The club chairman. You performed poorly. I'm not going to pay you the remaining months, even though we agreed. And because there's no clear process to resolve such a conflict, the chairman will utilize that opportunity, because the coach has been fired and there's nowhere they can properly go. Because when you look at the judicial bodies at FIFA, like, for example, Gava mentioned, we have the disciplinary, we have the ethics,
and
we have appeals. So, but where do I take this? And in most cases, it's very simple. If your contract is not deposited and approved by the federation, it means even though you raise that conflict at the federation, it cannot be handled.
But then for me, that is wrong because this is a commercial issue between the club and the federation. I mean, between the club and the manager. Because ideally, whereas the club is a member of the federation, but we have privity of contract because this contract is not between the federation, the club, and the manager. In any case, the federation never pays the manager. The manager is paid by me. So if we have an issue, as I said, then we should find a way of resolving our issue.
Yep. And let me give another.
Isn't that now, Gava? Isn't that now the point where the federation comes in to offer a platform for you, the team, and the coach to resolve the matter?
No, because the federation does not need to step in because myself and the coach, we could have our contract that has a very elaborate way of how we'll be resolving disputes when they come in, which is normally in the dispute resolution clause. We could say that when we have this dispute, we will start by mediating. If we fail to get an amicable settlement, then we could probably push the issue to arbitration. Then we say we will have one arbitrator. That arbitrator will be appointed by Resolve 360. The venue of that arbitration will be at a boardroom somewhere in Chira, and the law that will follow, the law that will govern that arbitration will be the law of Uganda, will be the law of England, will be whichever law you get. So the federation, in no way, it doesn't appeal to me that the federation has to come in to resolve an issue between a commercial issue between myself, a manager, and Bakshi, who is the board chairman of a different club. The federation could just come in, maybe to take note of the award, the final award, and say that this was that. So the federation could, in terms maybe of enforcement, of saying, oh, the club has to pay you, or you have to pay the club. That is when the federation can come in. But the federation coming in at the very instance that the dispute has come in defeats its purpose of it instituting arbitration as statutory clause for us using arbitration, because then it is trying to infringe on our principle of party autonomy, of the parties themselves trying to decide how they resolve their dispute. So for me, that is wrong for the federation to come in at every instant. The federation should have quite a number of staff, really, because they keep on intervening everywhere.
I say this, Gava is coming from a point of principle, right? But
Yes.
when you look at the practicability, and that's where the challenge is, and that's where we now need brains like Gava to come into the sports and give us this information. The point of practicability is the club is registered as a company, right?
Yes.
So the company is allowed to do business.
True.
Part of the business is hiring a coach. Part of the business is contracting a player. The role of the player is to score goals, is to make sure goals don't enter, is to defend, right? The role of the club is clear, is to pay the money.
True.
The role of the federation is to make sure football is played.
True. To organize the club. The club simply belongs to the federation.
Now, if I have an issue with my player, right, and this player is not able to satisfy what we agreed on, it means at any one moment I can take this player to the commercial court. For what? For breach of contract.
Or we could have a different way of trying to resolve the issue.
Now, a mediator.
We could have a mediator coming in to say, there's this issue. This issue. So how are we?
You get it. But
then we report back to the federation that we had an issue with this player, but we resolved it. Or the player reports back and says, I had an issue with the club, but we resolved it through this means, and this is what we agreed. So the federation can try and follow up and say, there was that issue that reported to me, then so what has happened to it?
Yeah, what was the documentation
that is happening? You get the practical bit that is happening is that when we are having conflicts with the club and player, the person we are supposed to run to is who?
Is the federation.
You get it? So if the federation fails to handle our issues, in most cases we say we are for football. The term we use is we are for football. We are for this. So please.
We are for cricket.
We are all this player go. We all
want to grow rugby. Yes.
We want to grow Ugandan sport. So please, you have refused to commit part of your contract. I have felt part. So please go.
Yeah.
Then you ask
let's go in good faith.
Let's go
as gentlemen.
But it means you are setting a precedent. That's what Gava said. You are setting a precedent.
Wow.
It means time immemorial, all the conflicts that will be resolved will be, we are doing this for the sport, but you are not actually developing the sport. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen.
So there are very many instances of that nature,
Mm,
and it's important for us, to from a dispute resolution point of view, to kind of maybe advise or even see how better we can make these rules or statutes. And I know it cuts across different sports. For example, recently there's the issue with Nile Special and the clubs, maybe say in rugby, where the clubs say,
yeah.
well, you had a deal with the federation, but you don't have a deal with us, so you can't
Yes.
push us to push out your material. So all
Mm,
those are, and these issues, given how Ugandan sport is growing, they are only going to get bigger.
bigger and
The
worse.
money, the money, the money involved is only going to get bigger, because if you look at most of the sponsorship nowadays, you announce like a sponsorship package on internet and people are like, did
Yeah.
you only put in that? And look at how
Mm,
much exposure it's getting from the sport you get. So
yeah.
we expect now Nile Special can't go be package it has given, right, to rugby.
Yes.
Maybe Plascon won't go below that package it has given to maybe Uganda cricket or Uganda netball. It's only going to
Yes.
get bigger, meaning more is going to be at stake. Players, we are going to run a sensitization drive. Players are now going to also be more assertive. So it
Mm,
just makes sense for us to, as a general as sports enthusiasts, as a sports body, to clean up house and to make sure that we improve some of these things. Because if we don't,
yeah.
then there's a lot of money that will be at stake, a lot of money that will be lost, a lot of business that will be lost, which is really not in the general interest of sports or growing sports.
Yeah, this has been quite a conversation, gentlemen, especially on dispute resolution in Uganda, in an environment where for many of us who are really into sports because we love sports. Really, you wake up one morning. Today, really, Peace Lekuru is signed to two rugby clubs. She's in Thunderbirds, but she's also with Avengers. So that's already a conflict, in its own
Mm,
magnitude. Um,
mm,
we have seen players getting punished by FUBA, and then FUBA coming back and saying no, because if the player was ejected, they don't need to serve any further ban, and that alone also raises questions about, one, the kind of mindset that you're giving to these players and how you're helping and how the teams are being affected by the rushed decisions, because it seems like FUBA continuously makes rushed decisions when it comes to some of these
mm.
decisions that concern players and also the clubs. Then in cricket as well, we've just seen different people resigning, and there seems to be a little
Yeah.
bit of question marks on why the resignations are happening. So, is this the time now where we say we need to come up with a center of arbitration that manages and most of the conflicts that are happening in the different sport disciplines? And how do we ensure that the different sport associations sign up, agree to this? Because we also know that some of the people that head these federations or these associations look at these associations as a point of making their living, not ideally to grow the
Yeah.
sport.
So what I can tell them is that in order for you
Oh dear me, Gava, you've gone off. Yeah,
to think to think long term and to think smart. Are we
Gava,
back?
before
Are
you
we
go far,
back?
please go back. Please go back. Yes.
Yeah. What I wanted to say is that for people who run Ugandan sports, and I want them to look at me in the eyes as I say this, the only way to grow Ugandan sports is by you thinking long term and not short term. These small monies that you're eating currently won't help you. In fact, the bigger money will be if you clean up the house and you have such great stuff. You have a better product to sell out to sponsors, meaning you'll attract many more sponsors. You'll attract much more money from the sponsors. So this little money that you're eating and scrambling for right now, it doesn't make sense. and the money will never get finished. You'll eat, and then we'll kick you out, and then we'll get other people, because we will notice that all you're doing is eating and not growing the sport. So what I can say is that, given the many challenges that we have in Ugandan sport, yes, the time is now for us, one, to include local practitioners of ADR, of alternative dispute resolution.
Wow. A great.
And arbitration. And I can give an example. For example, you can hear us?
Yes, now I can.
Moses?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that we need to empower local practitioners and involve them in some of these things, because it doesn't make sense for us as African parties completely executing a product, a project or a sport here in Africa, exporting our dispute to Lausanne in Switzerland. Yet we could have local practitioners. We have people here who are trained. For example, Bakshi here recently did arbitration training, and I've also done arbitration training. I've done mediation training, So you're already looking at two professionals who can get a dispute from a team and be able to resolve it, or who can try to resolve a dispute between a player and a club. Because not all the time that when a player and a club have an issue that they should go to court or should go to FUFA. Sometimes the issue can be solved, down there. So there's a need to empower local practitioners. There's a need to create more sensitization to teams across all sports, and also the federations, because without the impact and effect of the federations, then whatever we are trying to do with the teams will not be, won't be anything. So there's a need for teams to have what I would call balanced contracts, where the contract spells out rights and obligations, risks of the different parties, and thereafter tries to assign different obligations. That's why Bakshi was trying to spell it out, that as a club, my obligation is to pay you. As a player, the obligation is to play for the club. And that is why now it brings in the additional issue that now, as a federation, why do you want this contract that is between two private parties? Why do you want to know about it? Right? If we're not doing anything wrong, then as a federation, all you should do is to govern us and organize competitions. We will take part. In case there's any other dispute, then that is when we'll probably have to. The federation can come in to punish people who, maybe when you're on the pitch and you, the federation disciplinary committee can then come in, but then we can't burden disciplinary committee with issues from the 16 clubs in the first division and all the other clubs up to regional. Everyone has to go to disciplinary committee. I think that's not right. With that, the federation needs to employ about 1,000 people if they're able to, if they want to deal with all those cases. Then we have to look at the ambiguity. We have to look at the ambiguity in the regulations and try and make sure that we deal with that ambiguity in the regulations. We have to look at issues of what exactly is being used in these regulations, which dispute resolution mechanisms are being brought forward, and how to improve them in the regulations. So that is very, 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 very important. So it is important for us as sports enthusiasts, as people who are interested in sports, to be able to address our minds to some of these challenges, because at the end of the day, some of these challenges is why sports won't actually go forward. I remember there's a time when we had DSTV coming on board to broadcast our league, and we had issues, and we ended up having two leagues simply because there was a dispute somewhere, and the dispute couldn't be resolved with the existing dispute resolution mechanisms. And the only way that I've seen FUFA trying to resolve that is in their statute, saying that they will have only one top tier football league. So there's quite a number of ways that FUFA could improve. There's quite a number of ways that FUBA could improve. There's quite a number of ways that UCA can improve, because the Cricket Association recently had a dispute with a coach. They let go of a coach over what I would call an issue with the contract. And of course, when you look at the contract, for those of you who know the information inside, you notice that there's a certain issue that could have been worked around in a certain other way. And there's issues with netball, where even the head of the federation had to serve a few days in jail. There's issues in boxing. So as a sports enthusiast, that hurts me that I am a local practitioner of ADR, well trained, highly trained, and I can't help. I want to help. I want them to come. I want us to work together. I want us to change how we look at disputes in the sports industry.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this is quite a topic. We could talk about it for 2 hours, but for the next 10 minutes, I want us to discuss something that probably players will appreciate. Different federations are signing a massive contracts with different sponsors, but there's a niggling issue of player image rights.
That is the issue.
We have seen this
Yeah.
in rugby. We have seen this coming up in football, and we've seen that basketball is tending towards signing massive deals as well. And this could be something that could come up in basketball as well. What are the things that stand for basketball in Uganda, and what are the potential ways in which players can be protected in terms of their image?
In the beginning, you remember we mentioned, me and Gava, that one of the things that can easily cause conflict is when it comes to signing sponsorship deals. It's very clear. When you look
The internet doesn't like
Yes,
back.
Moses, I think we are back. Whenever I come in to speak, and I think that's why you should stop hosting me, because whenever I come to speak, it seems someone says, let that person not speak.
Yes,
But this is
yes,
what
but
I'm
go on.
saying. When you look at from a layman's perspective, contracted to a club. So it means the player, hey, I think Moses, you don't want me to speak.
Please speak.
So I'm saying when a player signs to a club, it means the player welfare, the player development, the player's contribution to the public, the player's contribution to the nation, to everything, to growth, to the commercialization of the sport, depends solely on a club. Imagine a club signing 2, 3, 4 players that are very good, and they move from, for example, I'll use a very good example of this season, the men's national basketball league. UC was in relegation, right? Right now it is playing the semifinals, playoffs. And there are about 2 or 3 players you can look at and say, by the way, that player is a very influential player. That player has moved the club from relegation to a semi-final playoff. It means that specific player has increased the commercial value, not only for the player, but it has increased the commercial value of the club. It has increased the commercial value of the league. And it means FUBA, the federation, its commercial value also increases. So what does it mean? When, for example, I am selling the league, whether it is the Uganda Premier League, the FUFAB Big League, the Regional League, the Basketball League, the Cricket League, the Rugby League, I am selling the product and saying, by the way, there's that player in every game, he averages maybe 20 points, 10 rebounds, and all that. Imagine you sponsoring a league with such a player. There's this player, he'll always make 3 tries. There's this player, he'll always score a goal in every game. I am selling the value of a player. It means I'm also selling a value of the club. It means I'm now selling the value of the league. So whose rights are you selling? The rights you are selling are not for anyone else. The rights are for the player. But who is in charge of the player? The person who is in charge of the player is the club. So it means as you do your sponsorship deals, as you market the league, as you get your sponsorship deals, you need to put in mind the value of the player. But this is the downside we have in Ugandan sport. We are an amateur sport. At the moment, I'll tell you, it's only the Uganda Premier League that is semi-professional. The rest of the leagues are amateur. So however much you want, the discussion of player rights is out of the question. Because how many clubs, whether it is football, rugby, netball, any sport, how many clubs that have contracts, professional contracts with players, what does it mean? They are paying them their salaries. They are paying rights as they go on. They are paying NSSF their savings. How many clubs are doing that? So it means we haven't yet reached that professional level. But it means the people who are running the federations should make sure they professionalize the leagues so that we are able to have player rights. But without a professional league,
Goodness me, someone give Bakshi good internet.
will always be
This is a serious discussion.
no, you see who doesn't want me to speak. So it means, as I conclude this, and someone has said it,
Yes.
rights, Uganda is a lawless country. No one has rights, let alone player rights. Very true. But it means if we want to make money, let me tell you, if we want to make money, for us who run sports in this country, if we want to make money, we need to make sure we professionalize our league. But we need to professionalize our leagues by going back to what Gava said. If you want to eat every money that is coming out, a sponsorship deal is coming, you want 30% off the sponsorship deal.
They've given 9.7 billion, you're eating 9
billion.
So giving the club 0.7 billion.
So, how do
grow?
you think the sport will grow? But what do you want? You are demanding a club, please give us 10 tweets every day. Give us this, give us this, give us this. So
Put the sponsor on every graphic.
So do you see that? So it means you cannot grow the sport. So the issue of image rights, I know we all want to have image rights. We want to have our players have image rights. We want our players to earn money. I do not want to see a player coming late to a game, coming late to a training. Why? Do you know the reason they are giving? Hey, manager, I have to first go and make some money so that I'm able to put food on the table, so that I'm able to pay rent. Why? Yet this player
I'll
is
stop you
playing
there.
80 minutes.
I'll first intercept you there. Just recently, during the FUBA quarterfinals, one of the players from a team that is managed by an assistant coach, who is a manager, who is somewhere above at FUBA, they asked the player why he arrived a bit late, and he said, no, they asked him why he was drinking soda, and he said, give me money on time, I will eat food on time, I will arrive on time. You know, and that speaks about the things that you're talking about.
No, you're very spot on. You're very spot on. So I'll conclude this because this is a conversation we have had online. I remember when people are saying media houses, image rights. You do not have image rights if you're playing amateur games. If you do not have image rights if you're in an amateur league. If you're in an amateur league, it means you do not have a contract. The contract you have is either by word of mouth, or I've sent you a WhatsApp message, or I've sent you an email. It does not fully describe. It goes back to what Gavas mentioned. The contract should be able to stipulate, if you fail to protect my image rights, if you fail to pay for my image rights, where do I go? You get it? That's why we are saying...
That's why it's chaotic now. So
yes.
if I don't satisfy image rights, where do I go?
Where do I go?
Committee, appeals.
You get it?
For example, if it's football.
Where do I go?
Because those are the judicial bodies in the statute.
Yeah,
so
and
that's
because
why
we have
we are
seen
saying,
some players just walk away and go to a different country. You know,
No, but that's why we are saying, how best can we advocate for third-party dispute resolution mechanisms? Because they are provided for by in the law of Uganda. If you are in Uganda, you are being governed by the constitution. It is provided in the law that you can have a third-party resolution mechanism. That's why you see people like Gava have come out with the resolve and saying we need to create awareness about dispute resolution. We are training people in dispute resolution mechanisms.
Actually, we can even organize and train clubs, the federations, different federations
in dispute resolution
mechanisms and how best they can improve themselves. I want to start with FUBA.
But actually, the thing is, Moses, the thing is, what this means is that federations have communities, instead of using their judicial bodies that are there fining what people all the time, they can actually have independent third-party dispute resolution mechanisms that operate on a needs basis. You are not saying this is a full-time person. No, they are operating on a needs basis. You get it? So all these are things that we want to start speaking about. It's good you are hosting us today, and hopefully I'm going to now, my ancestors will accept me so that we start having these conversations. But I feel it is very important for us to have these conversations. I can go back from all the way from the 1990s to when I really got into football management and professionalism, that there are issues that we have failed to work on, and most of them can be solved by a third-party dispute resolution mechanism.
Yeah, quite some interesting feedbacks that we're getting here. Jay says, Bakshi is right. There isn't a professional league in this here country. All these funds end up in the pockets of the directors, chairman, etc. And then he also goes on to say,
their chairmen are very chaotic in Ugandan sports.
And he goes on to say, players are literally going hungry. How can a hungry man start thinking about image rights? He's just thinking about how to eat food.
How to eat food and provide for his family.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, we've really been at this for 1 hour and 10 minutes now. Quite a conversation, quite the topic that we have really had to talk about. And I will definitely be engaging you severally on different topics as well. We want to talk about basketball in Uganda. We have not been able to talk about the semifinals that have happened. We want to talk about the VAR situation that happened.
That's a whole conflict situation we can build a scenario on.
That's a conflict.
Yes.
That's a conflict.
That we can build a scenario on.
Yes, and of course I know that I'm going to invite you again to talk about arbitration in sport, and ideally also to talk about why we need to have set up arbitration in the wake of Pamoja, the Pamoja bid being won by Uganda and the rest of
there's a lot of that because just a brief, because now we are going to have 3 countries. We are going to have different, because now this goes beyond even football. It goes into things like even construction. You're going to have multi-party disputes. You're going to have synergized projects across the 3 countries. There's going to be time for consideration of things like joinders and consolidation of issues. You're going to have issues along the supply chain, procurement issues. So transport. If you don't have a proper dispute resolution mechanism, we may not host Pamoja.
Yeah. Well,
though I want us to host Pamoja because I want to go and watch all those games in the different cities. I want to go to Tanzania and watch at the Benjamin Mkapa Stadium. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't host it. I don't want someone to get me wrong. I'm just saying we should set a proper ground.
Because I want to watch the finals at the Benjamin Mkapa and the opening ceremony at Nambole.
Yeah, I want to do that. Of course, my Kenyan friends, I'm sorry, but we can't leave.
For you, we shall come for the group stages.
We shall come for group stages in Kenya. But what I'm trying to say is that I don't know if we are looking at it that way or we are just simply looking at it as Pamoja bid. We just need to have that bird's eye view on now the intensity of how stuff is moving. And you have 3 countries involved. Those are 3 jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So you may have a contract with a Tanzanian company. I mean, to making jerseys, and you have to take them to a Tanzanian company. But then that is an entirely different jurisdiction. You could have a conflict there. You could be, and maybe the contract has to be performed in Tanzania, but you get an issue in Kenya. So how do you resolve the conflict around that? It's very, very interesting, and we should try to look at that when we are looking at the Pamoja bid.
Yeah.
For me, I'll really try to look at it from a dispute resolution point of view, and not a football, because we may not do well in the football.
Well, we shall maybe try to reach the knockout stage. No, okay.
We're already in the group stages, so now it's a knockout stage.
Yeah, we're already in the group stages. That's enough.
That's enough.
Well, gentlemen,
we are going to participate.
Yeah, gentlemen, I'm going to ask that we stop here today. And but ultimately, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all these insights with the different people who have been able to watch right from 8 p.m. when we began, 8:30 when we began this broadcast. And if you're just joining in, please feel free to catch the rest of it on our YouTube channel. That's News Liber, and you'll be able to catch the rest the conversation, and you get to hear what we have discussed concerning dispute resolution in sport in Uganda, why it is just a fallacy in the country, and why it's very important that we introduce it into our Ugandan sport, but also why it's important that our federations now start looking at how we can professionalize Ugandan sports in general, so that players can now start benefiting from their image rights. From me, Moses Echodu, and the panelists, Bakshi Asumani and Charles Gava, want to say thank you so much. Have a good night. Until next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.